Welcome to this week's episode of the Speak English with a British Accent podcast. I hope your week is going well. Now, on this week's show, we're taking a look at syllable stress, asking for favours at home, and the art of British understatement. Let's dive in. Section 1. Why long words can sound wrong, and it's not the sounds, it's the stress. Let's talk about long words. You know the ones? Responsibility, communication, opportunity. The sounds are fine, the vowels are acceptable, and yet something sounds off. Good news, it's not your pronunciation of individual sounds. Bad news, it's stress. Word stress, sentence stress, life stress, but mostly syllable stress. Now, in British English, long words are lazy. They do not give every syllable equal importance. They tend to choose one main stressed syllable, and everything else gets reduced, weakened, and quietly ignored. If you stress too many syllables, your accent instantly sounds too careful and therefore not British. So, hint number 1. One syllable does the heavy lifting. In words of 3 or more syllables, one syllable tends to be strong. The rest are weak and often include a schwa. So let's go back and look at those words again. So, opportunity, I think we said at the beginning, is actually opportunity. Opportunity. Everything bows politely to tune. Now, hint number 2. The ending often tells you where the stress goes. British English loves patterns, but do remember it does like to ignore them sometimes. But here are some extremely useful ones, though I'm sure there will be exceptions to the rule. So words ending in shun, the stress usually falls before the ending. So it's communication. Communication, not communication. Communication. And the same with information. Information, not information. The ending is weak and a bit boring, as it should be. Now, words ending in itty, the stress falls 2 syllables before the end. So we've got responsibility, responsibility, and you'll hear it in possibility, possibility. Words ending in graphy or ology, the stress lands just before the ending. So we've got photography, photography, psychology, psychology. This one alone fixes a lot of accents. And hint number 3, unstressed syllables are not mini-stressed. This is a big one learners missed. Unstressed syllables are shorter, quieter, less clear, and often contain that schwa. British English survives on schwa. For example, comfortable, comfortable. We've got the main stress landing at the beginning, comf, and then we've got that t, comfortable, comfortable. So I want you to listen to these next 3 words and identify where the strong beat is. Communication, responsibility, photography. Now you have a go. Exaggerate that stress and then relax it slightly. That rhythm, not the sounds, is what makes it British. So let's do it again. Communication, responsibility, photography. So if long words feel slippery, unpredictable, that's normal. You're not meant to control every syllable. You're meant to trust the stress and let the rest fade politely into the background. British English isn't crisp everywhere. It's confident in the important places. Now, I've got more about stress in Course 2 of my British Accent Bundle at learningbritishaccent.com/bundle. Section 2. Asking for favours at home without sounding like a monster. Today's everyday English situation is one we all know intimately. Asking for a favour when at home. You want help, you need help, but you absolutely do not want to sound demanding, rude, or like someone who has forgotten how politeness works. British English to the rescue with softeners, apologies, and emotional cushioning. Let's get domestic. The golden rule of British favours. In British homes, you don't ask for a favour. You apologise first, minimise the request, and often sound like you're the one being inconvenienced. Efficiency, no. Politeness, excessive. So here's some useful British phrases for asking favours at home. 1. Would you mind? Would you mind? Meaning, please do this. Would you mind taking the bins out? Would you mind? Now that would you, can you hear that j sound in there when we link the words together? Would you mind? Phrase number 2, any chance you could, meaning I'm hoping very much that you will. Any chance you could put the kettle on? So we've got a long A sound in chance. Chance. It sounds casual, it is strategic. Phrase number 3, I don't suppose you could, meaning I know you probably can, but I'm pretending you can't. I don't suppose you could help me move this. So it's a weak don't. I don't suppose. I don't suppose. We're putting the stress on pose. Phrase number 4, when you get a minute, meaning soon, ideally now. When you get a minute, could you have a look at this? When you get a. Again, a minute, it's that schwa, a minute. And phrase number 5, do you mind just, meaning it's small, probably, allegedly. Do you mind just loading the dishwasher? Do you mind? Do you mind? Just is softened, not stressed. Do you mind just loading the dishwasher? A potential real-life exchange, the classic chore request. You? Sorry, would you mind taking the bins out when you get a chance? And them? Oh, yeah, sure. Translation, please take the bins out now. Notice the apology first, the softened request, and no urgency expressed, but it's fully expected. And real-life exchange number 2, the bigger favour. You say, I don't suppose you could help me with this cupboard later. It's just a bit heavier than I thought. And they say, right, yes, later then. Translation, I definitely need help, and I'm pretending this is optional. And now we move on to teenagers asking for favours, which is a different dialect entirely. Teenage English has its own grammar rule. The tone is flat, the politeness markers are optional, and the urgency is extreme. What parents hear as a demand, teenagers often believe is a perfectly reasonable request. So let's translate. Teenager version, I need a lift, meaning, hello, please reorganise your entire evening. Or, can you buy me that thing, meaning, money is imaginary and you owe me. Or perhaps, I'm hungry, meaning, I expect food to appear shortly, surprise me. The politeness gap, why this happens. So teenagers often skip softeners, would you mind, any chance. They use statements instead of questions, and they rely heavily on tone that says, this is obvious. They're not being rude, they're being efficient. Parents, however, are fluent in British English, where efficiency is deeply suspicious. So how can a parent respond, British style? Option 1, gentle modelling, polite but firm. So your teenager says, "I need you to drive me." And the parent's response, "How could you rephrase that if you were asking politely?" Translation, try again. This is a language lesson now. Option 2, polite reframing. The teenager says, "I need a lift later." Parent says, "Are you asking me if I'd mind giving you a lift later?" Extra points for calm delivery and a raised eyebrow. And option 3, dry British sarcasm. Teenager, "I need money." The parent, "Oh, how lovely. And how were you planning to ask for it?" Tone is gentle, but the message is devastating. And how about some more witty British responses to teen demands? When a favour arrives disguised as a command, "Make me some food," you could say, "What a fascinating sentence. Now, try it again, politely." Or they might say, "I need you to sign this." I might, depending on how this request is delivered. Or perhaps, "I need a lift now." Ah, you appear to be missing the opening apology. Or what about, "Can you do this?" And you could say, "Yes, I can. Whether I will is a separate issue." Very British, very effective. So some intonation hints. Polite British favour asking relies on a falling and rising intonation, softened auxiliaries, could, would, and emotional cushioning. Just a minute, any chance? Compare, "Can you take me?" to "Any chance you could take me?" One sounds like a demand and the other sounds so much more civilised. So I want you to say these out loud after me. "Any chance you could pass me that?" "I don't suppose you could just help me for a second?" "When you get a minute, would you mind?" Teenagers don't mean to sound demanding. They're just still learning the art of British social cushioning. Adults, meanwhile, are defending it. Deploy sarcasm sparingly, but confidently. After all, British English isn't just about pronunciation. It's about asking for help without starting a domestic incident. Section 3. Politeness level up. Following on from the previous section about domestic diplomacy, let's zoom in on something quietly powerful in British English. Modal verbs used for politeness. Not grammar for grammar's sake, but the social cushioning system that stops requests sounding like orders. Because in British English, how indirect you are matters almost as much as what you say. So why modals matter more than you think? Modals don't just express ability, permission and possibility. They express attitude. And British English uses them to signal hesitation, humility, consideration, and emotional distance from responsibility. In short, I'm asking, but I'm very sorry about it. The more polite the request, the less certain it sounds. Certainty equals confidence. Confidence equals risk. And risk equals sounding bossy. So we soften. The politeness modals you'll hear constantly. Firstly, could, not can. Could you pass me the salt? Could you? Could you? Why it works? Could introduces possibility, not expectation, and it sounds considerate, not commanding. Can you pass me the salt is fine, but it's direct. Could you pass me the salt? That's more British approved. Number 2 is would. Would, the emotional softener. Would you mind closing the window? Would you mind? Now why it works? It moves the request into a hypothetical space. It removes pressure and it adds politeness without adding length. Very efficient and very British. Modal number 3 is might, which is peak politeness. I was wondering if you might be able to help me later. Might be able means I would really appreciate help, but I refuse to demand it. This is gentle, hesitant. It's beautifully non-threatening. Often used when the favour is bigger, the speaker feels slightly guilty, or they're British and alive. And number 4 is wouldn't. Negative questions equal extra softness. You wouldn't mind helping me with this, would you? Wouldn't. So why this works? Negative structure assumes agreement, gives the listener an easy yes. It's polite psychology. And finally, we have couldn't. You couldn't just have a look at this, could you? Couldn't. Meaning, I'm assuming you probably can, but I'm being charming about it. Extremely common in homes, offices, and British life in general. So you might hear in real life, you wouldn't mind just feeding the cat, would you? And they would reply, no, that's fine. Translation, please feed the cat, I trust you will. Or you could say, I was wondering if you might be able to pick something up later. And they might reply, yeah, sure. Translation, this matters to me and I'm being careful. So polite modals rely on weak forms, smooth linking and gentle rising and falling. Listen to the music. I was wondering if you might be able to. Nothing is punched, everything floats, and British politeness lives in intonation, not effort. So let's practice these out loud. You wouldn't mind just helping me for a minute, would you? I was wondering if you might be able to have a look later. Could you possibly pass me that? If it feels overly careful, you're doing it right. British politeness isn't about being unclear, it's about being considerate by default. We use modals to reduce pressure, protect relationships, and avoid sounding like we've appointed ourselves manager of the house. Master these, and your English won't just sound British, it'll sound socially intelligent. Section 4. The Art of British Understatement. When not bad means absolutely brilliant. Picture this. You've just witnessed your colleagues surviving a catastrophic presentation disaster. Technical failures, spilled coffee, the works. Now an American might exclaim, "Oh my God, that was terrible!" But your British RP-speaking colleague, they'd simply sip their tea and murmur, "Well, that was rather unfortunate." Welcome to the delightfully peculiar world of British understatement, where saying less actually means so much more. So what exactly is understatement? British understatement is the fine art of describing the Titanic sinking as a spot of bother with the iceberg, or calling a monsoon rather damp weather. It's not just about being polite, it's a sophisticated form of irony woven into the very fabric of RP British English. When someone speaking with an RP accent says something is quite good, they might actually mean it's extraordinary. Not bad at all, that's positively euphoric. And if they describe a situation as somewhat challenging, well, you might want to run for the hills. This linguistic quirk emerged from centuries of drawing room etiquette and the famous British stiff upper lip. RP speakers, particularly those from traditional backgrounds, were taught that boastfulness was vulgar and emotional displays were terribly unseemly. The solution? Downplay everything. So here's how it sounds in everyday speech. The weather. A bit nippy equals sub-zero temperatures. Rather damp, could be biblical flooding. Quite a stiff breeze means hurricane force winds. Lovely weather could mean genuinely nice or torrential rain and gale force winds. For achievements, we might say, we did all right, I suppose, which would mean we won the championship. Not entirely awful means absolutely magnificent. It went reasonably well means it was a smashing success. Quite talented means near genius level, and not half bad is genuinely excellent. When talking about disasters, we could say a bit of a pickle, which means a complete catastrophe. Slightly awkward means mortifyingly embarrassing. Rather inconvenient could be a life-altering problem. A bit of a mess is total chaos, possibly on fire. Things are a bit sticky, which, well, this means we're in serious trouble. A spot of bother is a major crisis. Rather unpleasant is bordering on psychopathic. And if we're in the office, we might hear, "That's very interesting," which can be translated as, "That's clearly nonsense." That's a brave proposal, meaning you must be joking. Or, with the greatest respect, could mean I completely disagree. What about, "I have a few minor comments," which probably does mean please rewrite this entirely. And at your earliest convenience is probably, "I need this right now." Now, a classic British film which highlights beautiful British understatement is Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I'm going to put a link to the clip I'm referring to in the show notes. Definitely worth a watch. It's a scene that beautifully demonstrates understatement, and it's the fight with the Black Knight. Note the "'tis but a scratch, I've had worse, just a flesh wound." It perfectly captures how RP speakers use understatement not just as a linguistic tool, but as a form of humour and emotional control. So if you want to sound authentically RP, here are some essential understated phrases to practice. "I'm not entirely convinced." "That could have gone better." "Fair to middling." "Mustn't grumble." "Rather tiresome." "A touch unfortunate." "Somewhat challenging." "Not my cup of tea." I'll bear that in mind. The key is in the delivery, the measured pace, the precise articulation, the understated intonation. This is where RP truly shines. And if you're ready to sound authentically British, get the British Accent Bundle, learningbritishaccent.com/bundle. It includes everything you need to speak with confidence, clarity, and that distinctively refined RP sound. Whether you're an actor preparing for a role, a professional looking to enhance your communication, or simply someone who's fallen in love with the elegance of RP British English, this is your complete training system. And between you and me, learning RP is not half bad. In fact, it's rather brilliant. But thank you for listening to this week's show, and I hope you can join me back here next week. Have a lovely weekend. Bye for now.